Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today as we're going to be addressing something tricky, something a little difficult and a little bit involved because it affects American families, it affects your paycheck, it affects nations around the world. And it's a very important story that we've been following for about 6 months now. Something that isn't being covered by the mainstream news media because they want you to forget. They want this story to die. And that's a bit problematic because we remember and we don't want you to forget. But we'll explain what we mean in just a second. Now, if this is the first time that you're seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and we thank you for joining us. We do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to receive your chats, your tweets, and your phone calls from anywhere in the world to tell us what you think about the issues that are affecting us all. And we invite you to join us this Sunday to express your First Amendment right. It's not just an American right, it's your right to free speech and to talk about the things that matter to you. We hope to see you, and we look forward to seeing you this Sunday. Well, what is this thing that's hidden by the news media that's being suppressed and downplayed? How is this affecting your pocket? How is this affecting your life? Let's try and explain all of that. Now, what I'm talking about, as you saw in the title of the video, we're talking about Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, as much as many people think, well, it's no longer an issue. We left Afghanistan. We're no longer there. America ran away. Joe Biden instructed our military to run as fast as possible, to leave behind our weapons and our people. And it's over. We're done with Afghanistan. The United States is no longer involved. And that's what the news media would like you to believe. That's what the Biden-Harris administration and many Democrats would like you to believe. There are so many aspects of Afghanistan that are affecting our lives today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But I want to start off with, because I am a small YouTube channel here, and we get suppressed and we get threatened to be removed and unpersoned because, well, we're a small YouTube channel. So let me start off with a quote. And that quote is, quote, "Our Operation Allies Refuge ended up getting more than 5,500 Americans out." Sounds interesting. By the way, this quote is coming directly from Joe Biden. This is what he said to the American people about the extreme success of the departure from Afghanistan, which is widely seen today as an absolute abject failure. And in his speech to the American people, as you can see from the White House itself, Joe Biden told us he got out more than 5,500 Americans. And he went on to say, "Now we believe about 100 to 200 Americans remain in Afghanistan with some intention to leave." He goes on to say, "The bottom line, 98% of Americans in Afghanistan who wanted to leave were able to leave." That is a lie. Joe Biden lied to the American people on international television. He knew it was a lie. He knew it was a lie then. He knows it's a lie now. He has never apologized for that lie. In fact, at the end of 2021, we highlighted that the biggest lie of 2021 was the fact that Joe Biden said all Americans had gotten out, that he got everyone out of Afghanistan except for 100 to 200 Americans, which the very next day, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said was down to 85 Americans. Just 85 Americans were left in Afghanistan as of September 2nd. That's what they said. And they lied to you. They lied to your face, and they expected you never, ever to catch the fact that they lied. Because in fact, when we found out on October 27th of 2021, there were 479 Americans, at least at that time, that were still left in Afghanistan. At least 479. And there were reports, there were rumors that that number could be as high as 2,000. And God help us, I wish that number was actually that small. Now, the reason why I got into all of this and why it came up is today there was conversations in the Senate talking about Afghanistan and the United States' role in those final days before we ran away, according to the Biden-Harris administration's orders. And one of the things that was being said today in the Senate by Senator Josh Hawley caught my attention. Let's listen to him.
But at public reporting, September the 18th from CNN, public reporting says the CIA sent an urgent warning before the missile hit the car, warning that civilians were in the car, not ISIS-K, civilians were in the car. That's in real time. So the IC is warning in real time, an urgent warning that this is the target was wrong. And as you say, General, mistakes happen. I understand that. Mistakes happen. Here's what I don't understand entirely. So the CIA and the IC is warning, you got it wrong. You're targeting civilians. They ended up killing civilians. And I also understand that once you've launched that missile, there's no place to dump it off because it was in Kabul. It's a heavily populated area. Where are you going to dump it off? Where are you going to divert it to? I mean, you can't divert it anywhere, right? So civilians are killed. However, the next day, after the IC warning, after the death of the civilians, the next day, General Frank McKenzie, commander of U.S. Central Command, goes out and says that the strike had dealt ISIS-K a crushing blow. The next day, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, says that it was a righteous strike. The next day, the president of the United States goes out and claims victory for this strike. Now, what's strange to me about this is already we know that the military had been warned they'd gotten it wrong. And yet the president of the United States, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, all go out in public knowing this and go out and claim victory and say, actually, we got terrorists. Does that seem unusual to you?
Shocking, isn't it? So what we have learned today, February 9th, is that Joe Biden didn't just lie to the American people about how many Americans he was willing to abandon in the hope of getting a political win, something that he tried to spin into a success that everyone has recognized was complete failure and has led to complications around the world because it showed America to be weak and Joe Biden to be cowardly. Well, that wasn't it. So today, February 9th, we know that Joe Biden lied to the American people. He knowingly lied about the death of 10 civilians in Afghanistan because he wanted to spin a story, because he wanted to have success, because he wanted you to be deceived. Now, that in and of itself would be more than enough for a news story. Joe Biden lied about how many Americans were abandoned in Afghanistan. And in 2022, we find out Joe Biden lied about the death of 10 innocent civilians in Afghanistan. And he did both of these things for politics. He did this because he wanted a political win. His party needed to take advantage. But it doesn't end there. The problems continue to cascade. Let me show you what I mean by this. So, we know that on January 11th, we were told that 80 Americans were trying to leave Afghanistan. 80 Americans are still in Afghanistan. 6 months after the fact, after we were told that there were only 85 Americans in Afghanistan, and then we were told, no, it was 479 Americans in Afghanistan, and we were told they were gone. We got them all out. But remember that on December 13th, the State Department, the United States government, under Joe Biden, told the American people, December 13th, that there were less than a dozen people in Afghanistan. This is bad. And so, to put this into perspective, and the story gets worse after this, but just to get it into perspective, Joe Biden, as he was running away from the Taliban in Afghanistan, he kills 10 civilians, 7 children with a drone strike, trying to look like he's strong after his actions led to the death of 13 United States service members and members of the British citizenry. And so he killed 10 citizens. And then he took a victory lap saying, nope, it was ISIS. No, we know it was ISIS, even though, as we know today, that is a factual lie. He looked in the cameras, he looked at you, and he lied to you. And then in September, both Joe Biden and Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, looked at you on national TV and told you we had gotten out 98% of all Americans, and there were less than 100 Americans. 85 Americans were remaining in Afghanistan. In October 27th of 2021, very quietly from the Pentagon, America was told, actually, there's 479 Americans still in Afghanistan, still trying to get home. And at the same time, that weekend, we were notified that 2,000 Americans may actually be in Afghanistan. But the story's done. It's dead. No one knows. Then in December, when the story comes up again, relatively quietly, we see that the State Department comes out and says, oh no, don't worry, there's less than a dozen people left in Afghanistan. We've gotten everyone out. Until January 11th, when we find out there's 80 Americans still in Afghanistan, still waiting to come home. What's going on? And this is the Biden-Harris administration that wants us to believe that they have international policy down pat. They want us to believe that they're looking out for every American, that they have our best interests at heart, that they're paying attention to every issue, and that they're on top of everything that the American people are concerned about, even though they completely failed in the number one job, and that is to make sure that you and I are safe. It's the whole reason why the government exists, so that you and I will be safe. Let me be clear. This isn't just well, I think that's what the government is about. I think that's what they should be doing. It's actually legislation. Executive Order 12656. That's 12656. Primary responsibility for protection and evacuation of Americans from threatened areas falls on the State Department with the support of the Department of Defense. Specifically, the Secretary of State is charged with, quote, protection or evaluation of United States citizens and nationals abroad and safeguarding the property abroad in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and Health and Human Services. To not do this is to violate the laws of this nation as well as the foundation of this nation. And wait for it, because last week we found out the number is 9,000. I want to say that again. The number of people abandoned in Afghanistan by Joe Biden on purpose were 9,000 Americans. And we have the report as it has been published. This is from the United States Senate Committee meeting on Foreign Relations. This is the minority report issued on February of 2022. It's called Left Behind. 9,000 Americans were knowingly left behind in Afghanistan on the orders of the Biden-Harris administration. And then he looked in your face and he said on every news channel, every social media channel, and said, no, I got everybody home. It was an extreme success. He told us that this was over, that we were done though. We were done. We're no longer in Afghanistan. It's over. We are going to provide some humanitarian aid. Let me quote Joe Biden once again. As he said, according to the White House, and let me be clear, we will continue to support the Afghan people through diplomacy, international influence, and humanitarian aid. Now, I don't think a lot of people paid attention to that. I don't think a lot of people noticed what that actually meant, because I don't think a lot of people really were thinking about it. But it's your pocket. This is money your taxes are paying for. This is your money being given away overseas. So I think you should know what that means. Because what Joe Biden did is not only did he run away, not only did he leave $80 million worth of guns and helicopters and tanks and turned the Taliban terrorist organization into an international army controlling a country. You see, we're giving them money, a lot of money. And I know we were told we weren't going to give Afghanistan any money. We wouldn't give them more money. As of January 11th, and this is coming from CNN, the United States added $308 million in humanitarian aid assistance to Afghanistan. That's in addition to the money we had previously given, which means that since Joe Biden ran away from Afghanistan, the United States has given $782 million of your taxpayer dollars to Afghanistan and the Taliban. Now, mind you, this money was supposed to be used for only humanitarian aid. It's to make sure that the people were fed. It's to make sure that women were able to go to schools and teachers were to get paid. That is exactly what we gave the money for. $782 million to feed the people, make sure teachers could go to schools, and that girls could go to school as well. And now the UN is telling us that the United States needs to provide $4 billion on top of the $782 million that we have already given to Afghanistan. We have to give more. You see, the UN said on January 11th, amazing how all this happened on one day, and you really didn't hear about this, but the United Nations told the United States, they said, there is an emergency in Afghanistan at this time, and that $4.4 billion is needed for Afghanistan humanitarian response and aid. And that if we don't do this now, next year, they'll be asking for $10 billion. Now, the thing that really gets us is, well, that's $4 billion from the UN. That's from all the countries in the UN. No, that's from the United States. The rest of the world will put in $400 million, but the United States is expected to spend $4 billion. That's your tax dollars. Can you imagine what you could do with $4 billion to help the homeless in the United States, to feed our hungry, to all the families that are on unemployment right now and having difficulties because of COVID? How about taking care of those who are experiencing domestic abuse problems, those who are having substance abuse problems? Can you imagine what $4 billion would do for Americans in America? But the UN demands that the United States spends $4 billion on Afghanistan, where we have already spent $782 million in a country that contains up to 9,000 of our citizens that are being hunted by ISIS and by Al-Qaeda. I wish this story didn't get worse, but it does. Because let's take a look at, this is Senator Shaheen And again, this is from today, February 9th, as she was speaking in a committee about Afghanistan.
And I certainly understand the arguments that you're both making for relieving some of the holds that the West has on the financial economy of the country. But what I'm having trouble with is how to advocate to pay teachers and to release those funds when the reports that we have are that schools are open, but not necessarily to girls and to young women, that while elementary grades seem to be open to girls, high school is much more problematic for girls. And, you know, one of the things that I feel the best about over the 20 years of the United States engagement in Afghanistan was the number of girls who were able to go to school, the number of women in university, the number of women who participated in the economy of Afghanistan. And what you're both saying to us is we should reopen that economy, but to men only. So tell me how this is going to work. Why do we not have the ability to say to the Taliban, we're happy to support the efforts to pay teachers and to reintegrate the economy, but you're telling us you're only going to do that for men, that you're not going to do it and give opportunities for women. So I don't understand how that works.
Now, I find this to be very interesting because we just heard Senator Shaheen say she's happy to give $4 billion to the Taliban. She's happy to give it in humanitarian aid because women, not because of the economy, not because of it's the right thing to do, because she wants to promote women. Okay, fine. Seems a little bit limited in her point of view, seems a bit political, in fact, American politics, because Afghanistan is its own nation. Wasn't that the whole point of us leaving Afghanistan? Is that it's their nation and they have to run their own nation? And we have been very generous in giving them $782 million on top of $80 million in firearms. We gave them an entire army to a country we no longer have anything to do with, other than trying to get several thousand Americans back home. Other than trying to get our people out of that nation, away from the terrorists that are flooded throughout that nation, we have no other responsibility. We left. We gave them everything and walked away. Running away, some would say, depending on how you want to characterize the Biden-Harris administration. And now the UN is telling us that we need to pay $4 billion and the rest of the world pay $400,000, but the United States has to pay $4 billion for this nation that we no longer have anything to do with. We don't even have actual diplomatic relations with Afghanistan or the Taliban. Although if we give them this money, we will create that, thus legitimizing the first terrorist nation of the world. Literally a nation created by terrorists to support their terrorist ideology. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Not even Iran goes that far, but it's close. And so we need to give them $4 billion. And Senator Shaheen is happy to do that. She's not worried about the political ramifications internationally. She's not worried about the cost to the American people. She's willing to just throw money at them, as long as women are able to get their jobs. But in that foreign land, in Afghanistan, they don't value that. That's an American value. That's a first world value. And Afghanistan, as we know, is not America and is not a first world nation. Many would say it's not even a second world nation. It's a third world nation. They have very different views. But Isn't that Senator Shaheen trying to impose her will? Isn't that nation building to give them $4 billion that is tied to her political whims? So again, we have this problem. Joe Biden said he fixed this. This was done. We left Afghanistan. We ran away because Joe Biden told us it was over. And yet we're giving them money to build their nation. And they have our people essentially hostages, it would seem at this point, some unknown thousands of them. Our government is lying to us on a regular basis, telling us there's half a dozen people there, 100 people there, 80 people there. We keep just finding new numbers as the story becomes less and less important and less reported. As we try to cover, as we see the major news media trying to cover up the fact that Joe Biden knew we were killing an innocent family, and he decided to use it for his political advantage anyway. And his party, the Democrats, are happy to fund and give as much money as necessary to get their political whims in another country. But wait, I want to be fair, because the conversation with Senator Shaheen goes on a little bit further, so I want to be fair to her.
Truly applaud your passion on this issue and your support for Afghan women. What I would love to do is host a session for you to just meet some of our Afghan staff who are Afghan women and let them answer your question. I think, I'll tell you what they said to me on Monday. One, how on earth does the West think they're helping our prospects when we can't feed our families?
Yeah, listen, I understand that. And whenever I'm asked about what we need to do, my first response is we need to provide humanitarian assistance to ensure that the people of Afghanistan, the families of Afghanistan, are not starving.
Why? Why must we do that? That isn't our country. We already gave them money so that they wouldn't starve. We already gave them, their government, weapons, and we walked away. Why do we have to give them anything else?
And I understand that that means to some extent we've got to thread the needle. But I really reject the premise that we should enshrine with the Taliban their restrictive relationships with their citizens.
So she's okay to give them money and to have relations with a terrorist organization as long as they they appease her whim for a political ideology. That's okay. So everything is fine, and she's not worried about funding terrorism, even by accident, $4 billion to terrorists, a terrorist nation. She's okay with that, as long as they appease one of her political whims, a first world desire. You know, Senator Shaheen, this isn't looking good.
And so I guess I don't understand how you thread that needle and provide some of those safeguards. At the same time, we're trying to ensure that Afghans can be fed. And I totally agree, that's got to be the number one priority.
Again, why is that the number one priority for America? The only thing we have in common with Afghanistan right now is that some unknown number of thousands of Americans are in Afghanistan. The number changes every month. And that our government is willing to lie about it, and the major news media is willing to hide that from the American people. That's the only real thing we have to do with Afghanistan at this moment. And we have given them money. Why do we have to be responsible for more? Why are we responsible for their schools and their education systems and their citizens? Why? Right, let's go on.
But what kind of leverage is there then to try and encourage the Taliban to be more inclusive in what they're doing?
Well, I think the second thing I would say to you is that there are women who are in work, but they're at the moment not being paid. They're teachers, they're nurses, and we're dependent on their goodwill to turn up at the health clinics and at the schools. Thirdly,
So they are being paid. They are working. It's not our responsibility to make sure they get a paycheck. We don't make sure that Americans get their paychecks every week in America. But we're supposed to worry about whether or not someone who lives in a foreign country is getting paid by businesses in that foreign country. How is that the American people's responsibility? Because it seems that Senator Sheehan is saying it is our responsibility. And she wants her political whim to live up to that responsibility, which doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense.
I think you make an incredibly important point about the education of girls over the age of 13. You referred rightly to the high school. And there's a march is coming up. At the moment, there's an easy excuse for the Taliban authorities. They can say, well, there's no money to pay the teachers. Actually, they've made a pledge that the schools will be open for girls over the age of 13 from March. Let's pay the salaries of the teachers to make sure there are teachers in the schools to see whether that pledge is fulfilled.
Why is that the American citizens' responsibility? Why is that the American government's responsibility? If you're a private citizen and you want to send money, go right ahead. The United States is the most generous nation in the world. We privately donate more money than any country in the world. In fact, most nations in the world put together don't equal what Americans donate every year voluntarily. But why is it the responsibility of the American government? Which is something I am not hearing answered. They keep saying we should do it because Afghanistan has a problem, but that's not our problem. But let's go on.
We've had private conversations that suggest it will be fulfilled. And so I can only put to you the arguments that are put to me by our own staff. They say, nation building isn't your job, that's our job. But you can either help us or hinder us.
Which means we would be nation building, which Senator Shaheen is happy to do as long as she is able to nation build the way she wants to do it with your tax dollars.
And you won't help us, they say to me, by strangling the private economy. And you won't help us if you're not standing by our side in supporting a phased approach to the shift in the budget of the government of Afghanistan away from Western international aid towards its own resources. At the moment, they feel we're tying their hands behind their back.
Well, again, I appreciate that argument, and I think we don't want to do that. But I also, based on the experience that we've had here, I don't believe the Taliban, frankly. And so the question is there some sort of a phased reopening that would allow us to see if they're going to be as good as their word? Because so far, they have not been.
So Senator Shaheen admits that the Taliban, a terrorist organization, hasn't kept its word. And we don't have a reason to trust them, which I would agree with. And we've already given them $782 million. And yet the people are still starving, the teachers are still unpaid, and girls can't go to high school. In a foreign country that we have nothing to do with, that we're not nation building. And yet she's saying, but give me a reason to nation build in Afghanistan where we have no reason to do so. And but through all of that, and you should know about this, but Afghanistan has become a dirty word. It's a word like shovel-ready jobs. You just can't say that in American politics. I will be undoubtedly suppressed because I'm talking about a story that the rest of the major news media do not want to talk about. But you should know about this because this is our nation. This is your tax dollars. This is influencing the rest of the world. The rest of the world is watching as the United States is just giving money hand over fist as long as you promise to live up to some of the ideals from the Democratic Party, if you promote their political ideology, they will throw billions of dollars at you. Forget about the American people. They're just going to use our money to give it to someone else for their political ideology. And all of this is happening while thousands of Americans are in the wind. You know, it really upsets me. Senator Josh Hawley didn't mention that there are 9,000 Americans potentially still in Afghanistan at this moment. We have no idea. I was on the phone. When I started taping this, I had just gotten done with one of my contacts in Congress. I have several. And I was just speaking with them, trying to find out, does anyone have any kind of confirmed or vague idea of how many Americans are still in Afghanistan? The answer is no one knows. I'm speaking to my contacts in Congress, several of them. Nobody knows how many Americans are in Afghanistan. We know it could be as high as 9,000. We know for a fact that at least as of January 11th, the number's at least 80. In December, we were told it was 6. They won't even mention that these Americans, some potentially thousands of them, are in harm's way. They won't even mention how much money they would spend. They won't even send a C-130 plane into Kabul so that all the Americans can just get on that plane one time and get out of the country. They won't even discuss that. They're willing to give away billions of dollars, but they're not willing to spend any money to get the American citizens that are in Afghanistan against their will to bring them home? Does that make sense to anybody? And truly, the biggest part of this story in 2021 and even today in 2022, the Biden administration has lied to you on so many levels. They lied to you that this was a success. They lied to you that they were trying to kill ISIS members when they killed a bunch of civilians, 7 children. They lied to you when they said they had no idea that these were civilians. They lied. They lied to you when they said there was only 85 Americans who were still left in Afghanistan, when they knew that the number was closer to 9,000. They lied to you throughout the year as they kept changing the number of how many people are still in Afghanistan, and they're still lying to you about that. They lied to you when they said that we weren't going to help the Taliban government, that we weren't going to have regular relations with them, and yet we're giving them $782 million, and yet we're talking about giving them $4 billion. Money that we cannot guarantee will not go directly to the Taliban to help and aid in their terrorism. There is no guarantee that no matter whether we give them another $100 million or $1 billion or $100 billion, we don't know how much of that money is going to go to terrorism. There is no one who can answer that question. They can say they will try. They can say that, well, we want it to go towards feeding people, but the other $782 million we gave didn't. Maybe the next $782 million will get to feeding people. Maybe. Maybe not. Why is this our responsibility? We left. At the cost in the lives of American citizens. In looking at the news, I found so much today that I did not know about. And I think the same was true for the majority of people watching this. I watch the news every day. I look at hundreds of different news sites. I look at dozens and dozens of different articles and news stories. I saw no one talking about this. I imagine most Americans have no idea about anything that we're talking about right now. And that's sad. Because the safety of American citizens abroad and domestically should be our number one concern. It's the reason why government exists. And our finances, as inflation is soaring at a 40-year high, as unemployment is increasing, as people are more and more concerned about their jobs and their livelihoods, our economy is important too. And where we spend money and who we spend that money on is important. I don't know, maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think, Mike, you're just overly worked up. Maybe you're not concerned about Afghanistan and this doesn't matter to you. That's fair. You may say, well, Mike, we have to make sure women are okay everywhere in the world. The United States doesn't have that much money or that much power. Maybe you'll say, well, Mike, we have to do it because we were in Afghanistan for 20 years where we improved the country, improved their sanitation, their education, their food. We improved that nation. By the time we left, it was more developed than when we walked in. But these are all arguments that can be made. The thing is, the major news media, the Biden administration, the Democratic Party, they don't want you to have this discussion. And that may be the most troubling part of it all. They're willing to lie to you, and they're willing to keep you in the dark. And that part really troubles us. But we look forward to seeing your comments on this, to hear what you have to say. And we hope that you will join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to be a part of our live stream, where we will talk about this and other issues that affect you and everyone in the world. We thank you and we hope you'll be well.